Now let's go ahead and compare at f9. So at f9 zoomed in, you could tell that 28 millimeters has really caught up to 22 millimeters. I mean, it's very hard to tell a difference. You guys could look for yourselves, see if you see any differences. If you look closely, you could tell that the rock wall is a little bit sharper over here at 22 millimeters. But again, if you remember what 28 millimeters looked at f2.8, this is a huge improvement. Again, at the edges, you could tell that 22 millimeters is better looking than 28 millimeters. And over here in the corners, again, 22 millimeters slightly outperforms 28 millimeters, both at f9. So now let's go ahead and move on. Let's start looking at 16 millimeter. Okay, if you look at these pictures side by side, 16 millimeters, 22 millimeters, both f2.8, you could tell, zoomed out, it's very hard to tell the difference. Obviously it's there, but let's go ahead and zoom in and see if there's any differences. Okay, right away you could tell that 16 millimeters outperforms, even at f2.8, 22 millimeters. So really, throughout the course of my time with this lens, I could really tell that focal length really mattered in terms of sharpness and performance. So right, as you can see, f2.8 at 22 millimeters, 16 millimeters is really a lot sharper. You could tell right away. I mean, right off the bat, it's hard to even tell that there's any haze or blurriness or anything at 2.8. The texture in the wall over here is, I mean, that's pretty good compared to the other focal lengths. That is very good. You could tell over here in the wall, it's not the sharpest picture in the edge over here, but you could tell that it performs really well. If you continue looking around and comparing the two pictures, I mean, the rocks over here are a lot better looking. Over here, the stone wall, I mean, you could tell everything's more crisp, more defined, better. The tree over here, the leaves over here, you could tell. While 16 millimeters at f2.8 isn't the best, it definitely outperforms 22 millimeters f2.8. Now let's go ahead and move on to f3.5. Again, 16 millimeters outperforms. If you just look at the rocks down here, again, it would be very hard to tell zoomed out, but zoomed in at 100%, you could see that everything's a lot sharper. This bush over here, you could tell is a lot sharper at 16 millimeters. The stone wall is really, yeah, I would say that's a lot sharper actually. The outline of the window. Let's go ahead and move on to 4.5. Again, at f4.5 zoomed out, you're gonna be able not even to tell the difference. But if we zoom in, I mean, really by f4.5, 22 millimeters has really caught up to 16 millimeters at 4.5. I mean, you could see, really, it's hard to tell the difference. Over here, 16 millimeters, more towards the edge, it's performing better than 22 millimeters. But really, I mean, 22 millimeters has really caught up by 4.5. Again, 16 millimeters obviously is a lot sharper. towards the edges, 16 millimeters. I mean, look at that. It's a little bit better than 22 millimeters, but again, you have to keep in mind that we're still at f4.5. So both of these are going to continue to improve as the f-stop gets narrower. Now let's go ahead and move to f5.6. Again, you could tell it's a very similar performance throughout the entire image. You can see the texture of the wall is really similar. The outline of the door, the outline of the windows, the railing up here, even closer to the edge over here, you could tell that really 22 millimeters is really catching up. Now let's move to f7.1. Really, the center of the picture is really the same by this point. I mean, there's no difference I could tell. The only place where there continues to be a difference is towards the edges. I mean, you could tell right away. You could see the texture of the sandiness of the wall and the cement, and over here you can't really tell that well. So again, edge performance is better at 16 millimeter. Same goes for corner performance. Now if we move on to f9, we're going to see that these images are basically the same. (16mm) still outperforms 22mm at f9, and even in the corners over here you could tell. So I mean, again, I guess it's good news for people like us that we purchased this lens. We want to shoot wide open at 16mm, and I mean, there's no problem with it. I mean, if you look at it, compare it to 22mm, 28mm, you could tell 16mm is a lot better looking throughout, starting from f2.8 all the way to f9 and even further up. Okay, so for those of you that are saying to yourselves, okay, I sat through your video, I watched it from beginning to end, I heard you talk about different apertures at different focal lengths. What does it mean? Tell me. In a few words, tell me. Cut down. What does it mean? What this means is the closer you get to 16mm at 2.8, the better your lens is going to perform. f2.8 at 28mm is not good, in my opinion. For me, it is not good. The only way I would shoot 2.8 at 28mm is if I really wanted a picture. I really had to have it. It was a unique picture that I didn't care if it was clear or not, that it actually kind of looked kind of bad in terms of clarity. That's the only way I would shoot f2.8 at 28mm. 28mm clears up very nicely by f4.5. 16mm, on the other hand, is very good already at f2.8. It does continue to get better through 4.5, but 2.8 is already awesome. And that's awesome news for those of us that got this lens because we wanted to shoot wide open all the time, or most of the time. That's awesome news. Now, in the beginning of the review, I told you guys to remember that this lens is renowned for having quality control issues. What that means is that while some lenses are definitely going to come out good, some, on the other hand, are not going to be so good. They're not going to perform up to what's expected of the lens and what other Tokinas can put out and can perform. So what that basically means is that my experience with the lens is not necessarily going to be your experience with the lens. And because our experiences are likely to be different, it's kind of hard to say, this is what the lens is going to be like, this is what it's going to do, this is how it's going to perform. It's kind of hard to do that with a lens that's notorious with quality control issues. Again, this was my experience with the lens, And it wasn't necessarily a bad one, it was actually very good to shoot with this lens. I liked what it could do. But again, the quality control issues are going to make it kind of hard to say this is what it's going to do once you guys get it. I think what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to return the lens, get a replacement, not because I was dissatisfied with the lens, with its performance or anything, but just because I want to have a comparison. I want a replacement to be able to compare it to the old lens to see if there's any major differences, if there could be any differences, how big those differences, if any, might be. And if this video gets enough attention, enough views, I guess I could always do a review on the replacement. Well, I'd just like to thank the 2 people that stuck around to the end of the video, and it was kind of long, but hopefully it helped somebody out there, and hope you guys liked the video. See ya.